Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Competitive Advantage Series presented by Ticketmaster. I'm Chris Tinsley. I'm an MBA student here at Sloan. And today we have Kavan Subnani, a senior product manager at Yahoo Sports, presenting on Fantasy 2.0. So the format of this is Kavan will present for about 20 minutes, and then we'll do 5 minutes of Q&A at the end. With that, I'll kick it over to Kavan.
Thank you. All right, so Fantasy 2.0. My name is Kavan Subnani. I'm a product manager at Yahoo Sports. And before we get into Fantasy 2.0 and what that means to our brand, I want to walk you guys through the history of Yahoo Sports. So Yahoo Sports was started in 1997 as an online sports news and information website. 2 years later, we added free fantasy sports, season-long fantasy sports as you know it today. And due to the rise in popularity of the game type, primarily with fantasy football, we started to invest more into it. So in 2004, we added Stat Tracker, the ability for you to track your fantasy scores in real time. We invested in creating a content team to help players with advice and analysis. We created a mobile app as the world was going to become mobile first. And then in 2015, we rolled out Daily Fantasy. And so this is all to say that gaming, fantasy gaming and technology is it's a strength of the brand. It's in the brand's DNA. So we thought about how do we evolve, what to build next. We wanted to be mindful of a couple different things. One, we know where our industry is heading. Sports betting is no longer illegal. In fact, it's legal in a few states in America. And two, this is a crowded space. There's a lot of sports media brands and apps and websites out there competing for your attention. And so, this is all to say that a lot of our investment has been targeted towards a traditional fantasy player. And not that there's anything wrong with that, right? Fantasy is extremely valuable to sports media businesses like ours, because of the engagement it drives. If you're playing fantasy, you are inherently more invested in the outcome, so you're going to come back and check to see what happened. But when we look at our audience at Yahoo Sports, just a small percentage of them actually play fantasy. We have 8-figure unique visitors that come to our property every month globally, but just a small percentage of them play fantasy. And so we have this large addressable audience that we could target with a new game type, right? You could think okay, why don't you just try to convert everyone to playing fantasy because if it's so valuable? But the problem is, fantasy is hard. Traditional fantasy is hard. If you think about looking at a box score, it's a glorified spreadsheet, and then beyond that, you're having to make decisions about which third string running back do I start? What fourth pitcher on the Mets do I need to be aware of? What backup point guard do I need to play? Rajon Rondo, Thomas Satoransky. And so how can we make fantasy easier, right? And before I move on to the next slide, I just want to give you guys a warning. I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation here. Don't be shy. All you're going to have to do is raise your hands, all right? All right, so tonight, 5:30, ABC, or 8:30, we're on the East Coast. Prime time, ABC, NBA game. We got the 2-time defending champion Golden State Warriors. They're coming off of 2 straight losses due to load managing their stars. We got the Philadelphia 76ers, who are playing well, coming off a win over the Thunder on Thursday night. So raise your hand if you think the Warriors are going to win tonight. All right, raise your hand if you think the Sixers are going to win tonight. All right, you see how easy that was? We'll have to watch and see what happens, but you see how easy that was? It's really easy to make a prediction when you're just presented with a couple options about what's going to happen. So we wanted to keep that in mind when we were approaching the solution to this problem. We wanted to make an easy-to-play game that targets casual fans, low barrier to entry. And so what we did was we created Yahoo Fantasy Slate. So Yahoo Fantasy Slate is a free-to-play prediction-style contest where you can make picks about things that are happening in the world of sports for a chance to win money. And we put it in our Yahoo Sports app. So our Yahoo Sports app is where you go to check box scores, read articles, watch highlights, even some live games. And the thought behind that was that we would be able to drive you directly to our content consumption. And so as your picks unfold in real life, you get notified whether you were right or wrong. And if you were the most correct picker in the pool, you would split the share of the prize. Okay, so we launched this as a beta ahead of the football season in 2018. And in that time, we didn't do, the reason why I say beta, we didn't do much marketing or in-app promotion around it. And there's a lot of experimentation, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But the two metrics that we care about, the number of entries per contest and the number of players that have played the game, we've seen steadily on the rise. And so I said our goal was to create an easy-to-play game, right? So how do we measure that? So the way we measure that was looking at the pick submission funnel. And so what I mean by that is what % of people that come to that intro screen experience actually go through and make a successful entry into a contest. And we saw that users made it there at a 92% rate, so that was a good sign. But not only that, 2/3 of players that played this game came back to play again, with the average player playing in over 8 contests. So our takeaway was that we did create an easy-to-play game that was sticky and users come back. And so I mentioned that we did a lot of experimentation with this game. So we experimented with several different factors. We built it in a way that allowed us to do that, right? So we built it in a way that allowed us to experiment with so many things to name. So like how frequently we're going to run these contests, the number of questions in the contest, the topics that they cover, the type of questions. Like, are we just going to do traditional winners? Are we going to do props? The number of notifications we send, and I can go on and on and on. And so our top 2 learnings from that were, 1, people love the NFL, especially in America. And that's not a huge surprise to a lot of you in this room. But we saw that our NFL-only contest drove 39% more entries than every other contest. And another thing we learned through user research, we did several rounds of user research via surveys and in-lab studies, was that users preferred single-day resolution windows. And what I mean by that is when we first rolled out, we wanted to mirror the contest to an NFL week. So the contest window would be open, you'd be able to make your picks, then it would lock at the beginning of Thursday Night Football, and then your first pick would resolve during Thursday Night Football, and then subsequent picks would resolve Sunday and Monday night. So the contest, you wouldn't know if you won or lost the contest until Monday night. And our users told us that was too long, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of apps and websites competing for your attention, and so we were able to iterate quickly, and after our initial launch, we started to do just single-day resolution windows. But that wasn't the only time where user research helped us out. So I know we're at a data conference, and a lot of the data that we focus at is very quantitative, but user research data for us is very important, especially when you're building a new product from scratch, when there's so many things to learn. And so one case study I wanted to share was around how we presented our leaderboard. So after a contest ends, you get a push notification. It tells you how you did. Most of the time, you didn't win because statistically, you had to be perfect to win. And initially, what we did when we rolled out was what you see here on the left. We presented the leaderboard as a list. But we heard through one of our verbatims in the user research that the place that you finish in doesn't mean much. So like on the left here, I finished in 1,342nd place. But what does that mean exactly, right? So we as the product team went back to the drawing board, and we realized, there's really only n+1 places that you can finish in a contest like this, where n is the number of questions. And then we came up with this design that you see here on the right. It's a bell curve representation of how you did versus everyone else in the pool. And so even here on the right, that I didn't win, you can see that I didn't win. It shows more context. I can still see that I was better than 80% of the people that played. And so this actually manifested itself quantitatively as far as social media shares. We've seen this shared several times on Twitter, whereas our previous leaderboard never got shared. All right, so another thing we experimented with. So you may have noticed in some of the screen recordings that there's video presentation alongside the questions. And before I get into the experimentation, the reason why we decided to put video in is because we're a sports media company. We create original content. And we wanted to use this game as an opportunity to create something that could be unique, right? This is something that we have a content team, we have the ability to make games, and we thought that this could be a good avenue for us to push that contextually on users. And so 3 different variants that we experimented with. What you see on the left, no video at all. What you see in the middle is a longer form TV-style show, 20 minutes of content. And what you see on the right is quick hitting, 4 minutes. Each expert only had about 20 seconds to give their opinion, more modern, Snapchat-esque, if you will. And interestingly enough, among these 3, we didn't see any difference as far as entries or conversion funnel. But between the 2 different video formats we tested, we actually saw that users engaged a lot more with the more modern vertical video one. So we saw a higher opt-in rate into audio. We saw a higher percentage of the content being watched. And then through user studies, qualitatively, users said that that experience was better. And so between the two videos, our takeaway was that users don't have time to watch long-form content on their phone. And so that's something that we're not going to push. And then the takeaway from video in general as well, like the presentation of video versus no video didn't have an impact. It's something that we're going to continue to invest in going forward. All right, so when you make a game like this, the prize money, that's the hook, right? Like it's free to play, we're giving away money. That's the reason why you're going to come in and try to play. And so it's really interesting because we want to frame it in a way that the money feels elusive enough to where if you win, you feel good about it and you want to brag about it, but not too elusive such that it drives you away, right? You don't want to feel like it's impossible to win. And what we've seen so far is that 7% of our unique players have won. And a lot of that's largely boosted due to a contest we ran during week 17 of the NFL where we had users just pick the winners of all the games. And if some of you may remember, there were a lot of heavy favorites during that week, and all of the favorites won. And so each winner only got 39 cents in that contest. But we've actually seen the inverse happen, where a lot of the underdogs won. And there was actually one time where we had around 30,000 entries into a contest, and there was one single winner, and that winner took home $1,000. And so, it's something that we can continue to experiment with, but it's the nature of sports. You don't really know what's going to happen, and I think that unpredictability is something that is intriguing and is going to hopefully keep users coming back. And then one other thing I didn't mention here is we did test different prize pools within a range. We tested, like our most common contest is a $1,000 giveaway, and we've gone all the way up to $10,000. And interestingly enough, within that range, we didn't see like the extra money drive more entries. So an example is during the conference championship weekend of the NFL, we gave away a $3,000 prize. And then during the Super Bowl, we gave away a $10,000 prize, and we only saw a 2% increase in entries. So really, within the range we've tested, we haven't seen much difference. And then so I mentioned at the beginning, fantasy is valuable to businesses like ours, to sports media, because of the extra engagement that it drives. So what we did was we looked at the user cohort that were playing this game in the Yahoo Sports app. And we did actually see by our top 3 metrics, time spent, session, and then subsequent ad revenue clicks, that they are more valuable, they are more engaged. So the takeaway is that games like this, lightweight games, still do drive a deeper level of engagement. And then finally, before we get to Q&A, 3 takeaways. Number 1, we identified a problem. We saw an opportunity with our market and our position in the market, and we rolled out a product and we experimented with it, something that we're going to continue to do. And we're going to continue to listen to the fans, right? Remember the Warriors and Sixers exercise that we did? We almost got 100% participation in here. And so that's something that we want to continue to listen to the fans, and as we continue to build games, just mimic the conversation that's happening naturally and present that in a game format. And then 2, that transitions into 2, that gaming is a strength of the brand. It's in the brand's DNA, and it's our competitive advantage. So it's something where we felt that we uniquely could deliver, given our position. And then lastly, you may have been thinking this throughout this entire presentation, but sports betting in America is no longer illegal. It's legal in a few states. We at Yahoo Sports have not announced whether or not we are going to be a player in that space, but if we were to, we would approach it with the level of integrity and make it the most fun, safe, and fair place to play, like we do with all of our other games, like season-long daily fantasy and this game. All right, thank you. Any questions? Yeah, it's really interesting. So we see ourselves as a property that can do multiple things. We are investing heavily in content, we invest in games, and we're starting to invest a lot in our social presence. So I see us expanding on all of those fronts. Yeah.
Are you guys doing anything for intra-game in a contest? I'm just thinking, for example.
Oh, within a game?
Yeah, within.
Like live picks?
I'm doing something in football, and by like 2:30 p.m., I feel like my week's picks are like sunk
Yeah.
We can like do something and bet on a different contest.
Yeah. So I forgot to repeat the question. Sorry about that. So I'll repeat this one. The question was, are you guys going to do anything intra-game? He feels that sometimes by 2:30 p.m. on a Sunday, like his picks aren't doing too well. Is there a way to get back into it? And I think for now, we're not really doing that. Just, I think the nature of our audience isn't one that is concurrently engaged on our platform, where I think like an offering like that, like live picks, makes more sense to an audience that is concurrently engaged. Like something like Twitch for like esports, I think would be a better fit for that.
What do you guys think about your portfolio game? It seems like the trends are towards these much more lighter weight,
Yeah.
easily consumable games, maybe at the expense of kind of the longer format or
Yeah.
substantial offerings. How do you guys think about how do you prioritize your product and strategy?
All right, so the question was, how do we prioritize our products within the different game types? There's been a trend towards more of the lightweight games, but what about our existing games? And the answer to that is, the way we're structured organizationally is actually to focus more so on our existing games than these new games. So, we're constantly reading our feedback forms. We're on Reddit. We're seeing Twitter. We have a customer care team that's constantly listening to our users, and based off of that, we prioritize what we think will make our existing games better, and we go from there.
Talk a lot about kind of fan engagement and inherently kind of how this makes things easier for users as well. So why is it that you guys kind of still have two apps when it comes to your fantasy?
Yeah.
Versus why not have one integrated platform makes it all?
That's something that's come up a lot. And I think they have two different use cases, right? Fantasy is a very complicated game traditionally, and so, especially, all the different things you can do as far as roster management, looking at your matchup, looking at your league, like players research, all of that. We just think that the mindset is different for like a traditional fantasy player versus a sports fan. And so that's why, with an offering like this, we thought it made more sense to go with a sports fan persona as opposed to a traditional fantasy player. And it would, there's some technical reasons why we don't combine it, but also I just think that the user personas are different. Yeah. Yeah.
When you were testing the app, how did the user research data of what they wanted differ from what the app members were telling you?
That's a really good question. The question was, how does what user research tell you translate into quantitative data? Is that right? And so, it's really tough for a game like this because there's so many variables with each contest that even though we run experiments, they're not true experiments in the sense of like we're controlling for everything besides one. And so we see trends. Like we see, like for example, when we switched to single-day resolution windows, we saw the retention numbers go up. And so, but that could also just be due to like the seasonality, like sports, they get more popular during times and less popular during times. So it's hard to truly answer that accurately. But I think that, we trust that our users say what they would do. But we do understand that there could be a discrepancy there. Mm-hmm. $5 or $10 Yeah.
compete against other people to win a bigger prize pool?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question was, will we convert this game to be pay to play? And the answer is, we've looked at that, and it's something that we've considered, but I think due to regulations and due to our position in the market, it's not something that's in our immediate roadmap. But definitely, if regulations loosen up, that's something we'd look into. In the back. What's the impact on retention? I missed the first part of what you said.
So like customer retention, right?
Customer.
Having new fans playing new games, how does that impact how many come back or how many stay with the product?
So the question was, when you're introducing new games, how does that impact retention? It's a good question. I think it depends on what the goal of the game is, right? Like I think traditional fantasy, the engagement there and the revenue channels, revenue streams there it's sufficient for retention to come back and manifest there. Whereas, something like this, the goal is to drive engagement to existing content offerings. Like, if I'm making a pick on the Warriors and Sixers, like, I want to go back and go to the box score and see if my pick is going to happen. So I think it's a tough question to answer just in a general sense, but depending on the situation, there's different success metrics. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, our goal is to attract new fantasy players. How are we doing in that? Honestly, the goal was to try to convert some of our existing sports fans that are coming to us into fantasy players. I had this conversation with someone yesterday at the conference about like chicken and egg. Like, if I'm making a pick about something, does that increase interest, or does my increased interest make me want to play a game? And it's a tough question to answer, but I think that, given where our position was and the fact that we have a lot of tourists to our property, we wanted to try to introduce them to lightweight offerings to get them to come back. And so as far as converting them to deeper fantasy players, it's still way too soon. We launched on September 12th. It's still a beta. We haven't done much marketing or in-app promotion, so I think we'll have to wait and see on that one.
The goal, obviously, is for Yahoo to make money.
Yep.
In 2018, in your daily fantasy, you offered some no-rate, no management.
Mm-hmm.
That was an attempt to get the current fantasy players to move over.
Yeah.
So the question is, A, how successful was that? And B, I would challenge your view that daily fantasy is as tough as it really is, and that you're missing huge, huge segments of the market, particularly women.
Yeah, no, so, okay. So the no management fees. So the no management fees, the goal there is to get people who might not try daily fantasy to try it. As far as the missing segment, like the audience segment that we're missing, I think you're right, and I think that's actually what a game like this is aiming to solve, right? It's supposed to be low barrier to entry, targeting people who are more casual. Daily fantasy is the hardest fantasy game, in my opinion, and we see that in the numbers, like the smallest percentage of people play. They are the most valuable, but in terms of absolute numbers, they're the smallest. And to address your question, we actually did run an Oscars contest this past weekend via Fantasy Slate. So it's something that we're experimenting with in terms of addressing different demographics.
I just think you could use your Yahoo database.
Yeah, that's fair.
A few women that play at the high level in DFS.
You do?
Yeah.
Nice.
For 3 years, I've been in the live final every 3 years at today's DK and draft. But came in second. First. But the challenge is, I think women are particularly good at daily fantasy sports, but it's never. I got into it because of my son.
Mm-hmm.
So and the other players don't have the platform that you have customers. So I just would challenge you to look at it.
No, that's a good question. Our head of marketing for Daily Fantasy is actually sitting right here. His name's Alex Healy, if you want to talk to him. Anyone else?
Could you just speak to how your product management team is set up and how, like, UX designers, development team, how your organization?
Yeah, so we have, I'm in the sports organization. We have somewhere between 8 and 10 product managers, around that many designers, and I want to say maybe like 50 to 60 engineers. And so the engineering team is split up based off of platform and product. So we have a web team, we have a couple back-end teams, we have Yahoo Sports app native development teams, fantasy development teams, and the PMs kind of align with the teams. And so, we as a product group, we talk about roadmap, high level, and within the actual product areas, and then based off of that, we prioritize and manage the team, work with design, and then it goes to the engineering team. All right, I think that's all we have time for. So I can answer questions afterwards, but thanks again so much. It's an honor to speak here. I've been here 4 years in a row. It's great.